Hey listeners, today I had on Matty Taylor, co-founder and general partner at Colosseum, a Solana-focused hackathon organizer slash accelerator slash venture fund, which just started its breakout hackathon. Matty and I got into a potential return to cypherpunk ideals from new Solana founders, how AI is changing the startup building process, and even Satoshi's true identity. You got to keep folks on their toes. All right, everyone, let's get into it. Permissionless 4 is right around the corner, June 24th to 26th in Brooklyn, New York. We're seeing new crypto applications cropping up all over the place right now, and this conference will be a place to get developers, investors, and founders all in the same place to have high-signal conversations about what crypto's future should look like. This one's for the memers, the dreamers, the builders, and the token lovers. Don't miss out. Plus, you can use the code Lightspeed10 for 10% off at checkout. Welcome back to another episode of Lightspeed. I'm your host, Jack Kubanek, joined today by Matty Taylor, co-founder and general partner of Colosseum. Matty, thanks for coming back on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me back, Jack. Happy to chat all things Solana.
So, fun fact, Matty, I write the Lightspeed newsletter outside of this podcast. It's Blockworks' daily Solana newsletter. Go sign up for it. Shameless plug. It's the best in the business. But our first edition of that newsletter was actually about Colosseum's first hackathon. Back in May 2024, you announced the outcomes of the Radar hackathon, was it? Or
it was the Renaissance hackathon. Yeah, Renaissance hackathon. I do remember that, and we're big fans of the Lightspeed newsletter. I don't know if it's the best. We have our own newsletter called the Codex, and I think there's like kind of friendly rivalry there, but we're big fans of Lightspeed and love what you guys write about.
No, Mike absolutely kills it. He has a lot of good technical stuff in there. We do have a friendly rivalry. I think, I totally forgot that there's a Colosseum newsletter. So this is the one space I can't shill my newsletter without some pushback. But also go subscribe to Colosseum Codex. It's a great read as well. I check it out every week. But it's cool to have you on. It's a little piece of Lightspeed history here. But for listeners who might not be as familiar, maybe just give us the quick and dirty rundown on what Colosseum is in the Solana ecosystem.
Yeah. So Colosseum is sort of three pillars that are integrated. We have the hackathon, which is sort of the way that Colosseum helps grow the Solana ecosystem, and specifically sort of the startup ecosystem on Solana. So it's for developers, but it's also for more established kind of like early stage founders and co-founding teams to go do their first or second engineering sprint and launch an actual startup on chain. The second pillar is our accelerator program. So we use the hackathon sort of as an evaluation process as well, as a way to attract developers. And we use that basically to award the top 10 to 15 hackathon winners and accept them into our accelerator program following each hackathon. And then the third pillar, which is our venture fund. This is how we make money. This is our business model. And we basically invest pre-seed in all of the teams that are coming into our accelerator. We're just focused on the Solana ecosystem. We're running hackathons for the Solana Foundation and the broader ecosystem. And so that's it holistically about what we're doing.
Great. Yeah. And as a reporter, the reason I really like to follow what's going on with Colosseum is I think it is sort of a proxy for what developers and like the public figures who are judges think is interesting or worth building in Solana at the current moment. So in that story I mentioned from earlier, we noted that like 4 out of the 10 initial hackathon winners were DePIN. And I remember in your second hackathon, we talked, there was a lot of DeFi going on. So you're running a hackathon right now, the third one, I guess. And I just want to ask, like, what's hot right now? I know that it's just begun, but from early returns you're seeing, what appears to be of interest to Solana builders right now?
Yeah, I think there's a few trends that are not just happening in this hackathon, but have been happening for a while. I would say over the past year or so, and I'd say one of the things that we're most excited about is sort of a return to crypto's cypherpunk roots. So we're seeing a lot of projects. I mean, some of the initial stuff that we were excited about when we launched Colosseum, namely like things like reimagining what the DAO could look like. So this is like MetaDAO for those that are familiar, or reimagining what sort of like digital gold in the vein of Bitcoin would look like if you were starting from scratch on Solana. So this is like ore. But we're seeing also a big push, especially using some of Solana's newer upgrades around confidential transactions through token extensions, and a platform called Arceum, which is actually an old hackathon winner for another project. But they're building sort of privacy enabling features for startups. And so one of the winners of our last hackathon was this project called Dark Lake, which is sort of building a kind of a ZK enabled DEX for private trading. But we're seeing that kind of continue with like different stablecoin projects, decentralized stablecoin projects that are kind of like taking a second look at maybe where others have failed, namely like Luna and others, obviously different mechanisms. But I think basically what we're seeing, I think overall, is like if you look back at like a lot of the Bitcoin talk forums from like 2010 to 2014, there was a lot of these kind of recurring ideas around like private stablecoins or DAOs or digital gold, and a lot of kind of discussion around that about what they could be. And I think, we're seeing kind of maybe the second or third generations of these things start to happen again on Solana, which we're really excited about.
That's really cool. I like that. Mert just did an episode that I was not able to be there for with Yannick from Arceum. Arceum. I say it Arceum in my head. But
it's probably Arceum. I'm probably mispronouncing it.
But either way, just talking about sort of privacy, and then Helios, I guess, came out with confidential balances recently. But yeah, what are you seeing in that vein? Because there's a lot of interest in privacy, but like, what kinds of startups are you interested in, and what, like, how can privacy be usefully leveraged on Solana?
Yeah, we're excited across the board. I think one kind of like thing to know about Colosseum is we have certain theses about what we're excited about in crypto, but our kind of like number one way of evaluating what we're excited about is the basically shipping and iteration speed of early stage teams. This is like why we use the hackathon as sort of the mechanism for which we evaluate basically founder talent to underwrite as part of our venture fund. And so we're excited just to see like what really high performing founders are focused on. And those areas that we can see so far is, trading. So I mentioned kind of like zero knowledge enabled DEXs, stable private payments. So this is can they take the form of stable coins, or adding some sort of layer of privacy on existing stable coins. And I think there are benefits obviously to having some layer of transparency with the blockchain. And I think we all kind of know about this like triple entry accounting. You can kind of see everyone's balances and kind of check where funds are being held. And obviously there's some layer of anonymity there, but it's kind of through tools like chain analysis and others, like you can kind of back into, in some circumstances, like who owns what on chain. I think that's great for certain use cases, but there's certain, especially large, I would say even like traditional financial players who maybe don't want to project on chain exactly everything that they're doing, and partially for even regulatory reasons, which I think is kind of counterintuitive. I think when most people think of privacy, they think, oh, like you're breaking the law or something like that. But there's certain circumstances where like a large financial institution would not want to project on chain that they have like a large DCA into some sort of asset. I think even funds like ourselves, like we sometimes buy assets on chain, and we maybe just don't want others to know, like which balances, we're holding these assets in for a variety of compliance reasons. And so I think there's a huge amount of people who want to add some layer of privacy for certain use cases. And then there's obviously the philosophical kind of argument, which a lot of, I think, founders tap into, which is just like, it's your assets, it's your privacy. You should, as an individual, have more control about like what you share with the world, right? About your financial activity. And so I think I just like to see a lot of experimentation on this. And right now what we're seeing is kind of centered around trading and stable coins for payments.
Okay, so when the U.S. government starts market buying Solana for the strategic reserve, it can do so privately, is what I'm hearing.
Potentially. we'll see what venues are available at that point. But yeah, I think they won't want to project maybe fully. And I mean this is what happens in the traditional financial industry, anyways, right? There's OTC desks. There's dark pools. There's all sorts of mechanisms where people get some more privacy on the assets that they trade.
Today's episode is brought to you by Ledger. Ledger is a secure hardware wallet for your SOL and logins, trusted by 7 million users, and securing 20% of the world's digital assets. It's built a robust ecosystem of products and services, making digital ownership more secure and accessible to everyone. Ledger's newest devices, Ledger Stacks and Ledger Flex, feature the world's first secure touchscreens, making it easier and safer to manage your Solana transactions and assets. With Ledger Live, you can seamlessly manage and stake your SOL and now your SPL tokens, all while staying secure. From Bonk and Pengu to Jupe and Ray, 130 SPL tokens in total can now be bought, managed, and swapped on the go via providers like MoonPay and Exodus from the security of the Ledger ecosystem. And then second piece of that, cypherpunk origins kind of theme is DAOs, which I think is a really interesting one. One that at Lightspeed we follow closely is MetaDAO and this idea of Futarchy, sort of market-based governance rather than one token, one vote DAOs, which by and large I think have failed at this point. So are these DAO startups you're seeing trying to do a different version of MetaDAO, or is it like MetaDAO's the platform and we're building tooling for that platform?
I'd say it's tooling and then startups who want to launch natively through Futarchy, through MetaDAO's Futarchy as a service kind of platform and new Launchpad. So I don't know if you saw this, but MetaDAO basically created this sort of new, I want to call it like ICOs, but like it's basically like a token Launchpad where a project will come to the platform and they'll say, hey, we're raising for some startup. They'll create this document on kind of explaining what they're trying to do. And then anyone can basically like contribute USDC or whatever capital to this pool of funds that will basically fund the startup. But the funds are sort of locked in this program or this smart contract where it's kind of rug proof, where basically the founders need to create proposals and the market needs to basically, as Futarchy enables, as you mentioned, like a decision market needs to come up to determine like what to do with those funds. So the basically the founders, if they want to rug the process, they can't just like abscond with the funds automatically because it's kind of escrowed in this contract. And so I think we're really excited about that. And then it seems like even teams in the hackathon, but also teams that we've invested in who are looking to launch a token, basically are evaluating this as a mechanism to kind of go for their TG, basically. Because I do think it provides like a lot of interesting protections for sort of retail investors and investors of all kinds. So I think, MetaDAO is like super interesting. We were the first investors or venture investors in MetaDAO more than a year ago. And we just think DAOs are a really interesting, again, concept that, I read a lot about when I got into crypto in like forums and stuff. And there was obviously the DAO, which was kind of like the first blow up in sort of DAO governance. And I just haven't seen to date, like, the one token, one vote really work functionally. I mean, we see all sorts of crazy proposals all the time, especially in ETH land, about, basically misallocation of capital. And I think so far what we've seen with MetaDAO and the projects that have used it, so like Jito, had a proposal for their tip router that used MetaDAO Futarchy markets to decide that. Several through Drift, and I think we just have seen much better decision making for those folks. And so we're pretty excited about it.
Speaking of token launch platforms, one thing I've been seeing recently, and I don't know if it's a Colosseum thing or just folks are building these, but I'm seeing on my Twitter feed vibe coding token launch platforms or like app launch platforms. So with that new kind of trend of, no technical expertise required coding, are you seeing maybe new kinds of builders entering these things and enabling
Yeah,
that?
yeah. Vibe coding is definitely taking sort of not just the crypto space by storm, but just technology generally. I don't know if you saw that, like, I think Y Combinator said that at least I think like half of their most recent cohort is like 95% of their code generated is from an AI kind of tool, whether that's like something like Cursor or Windsurf. But I think more and more things like Replit and Lovable, which are more like literally just prompt in English and create prototype automatically. And I think we're definitely seeing that a lot in our hackathons over the last few times. In fact, like Replit is like the AI track sponsor in our current hackathon, because so many people are starting to use these sort of tools to prototype, especially for things like hackathons, where it's this sort of condensed period of time where you need to kind of ship something. And so I think it's awesome. It just means that people can like experiment and prototype much quicker, because the biggest thing with a startup is like building something to the point where you can get it in front of potential customers and sort of validate, is there sort of market demand here? Am I headed in the right direction? And so you can just iterate much, much quicker using these sort of like prompting tools. And a lot of people just use these obviously prompting tools as like a jumping off point, and then you can like edit the code. And so we've made an investment in one sort of crypto specific one called dev.fun, which is growing quite quickly. I think they've done, close to over like 12,000 apps launched in like the first 2 months. And so they're not like fully formed, iOS apps with a ton of functionality. They're more kind of somewhere between like Memcoins and a very simple game, or kind of like click games like Mini Clip, if you're familiar. I don't know if you played like these click games back in the day. And so we're kind of calling them micro apps or meme apps at the moment, but it's just dependent on how much functionality you can put in the back end, and the model is getting better. And so I think the dev.funds of the world will actually evolve into much more powerful, like fully application kind of creating tools for folks. And we're definitely seeing it head in that direction, which we're pretty excited about.
The worry, I guess, is just more AI slop, which no one wants. But the real optimistic outlook from this is like so much of creating a startup and turning an idea to reality is just busy work. And coding is like, I don't want to say a waste of time, but it's not using your creative faculties to like put a thing out into the world. And so if people can just spend more time working on their ideas as opposed to having to process the nuts and bolts, like it would be a better world, I think.
Yeah, or just talking to users more, right? I think that's what it gives you, which is just like, I don't have to like, I build something in the past. It's like I build something. It took, depending on what you're building, at least several weeks to just like get something out to a proof of concept. And then you show someone and they're like, yeah, that's not really what I want. And then you have to go back to the drawing board. And that takes another, amount of time to just get something else out to show them. But with this, it's just like the iteration and feedback mechanism is like incredibly fast. And so I think, it's a good thing for crypto and technology as a whole, right? That we can just the founders can spend a lot more time talking to users and like showing them things rather than, in the kitchen cooking, basically.
Exactly. Yeah. One thing I wanted to ask about, Matty, was a narrative that was huge a few months ago that you just don't hear much about anymore is AI and crypto. I remember, I don't know, late 2024, any VC I would talk to was like, yeah, we're interested in AI and crypto. What can these AI agent swarms do? The Goatsy meme coin like changed my life, whatever. Like, you just don't hear from that. So I'm curious, just from your point of view running Colosseum, I guess, is AI and crypto as a narrative dead, or is it evolving? What are you seeing?
I don't think it's, dead. I think the sort of first iteration of it, which was, like these kind of slot bots connected to meme coins, Meta is sort of dead for now, and probably for good reason.
Yeah.
But AI is, like we just said with this whole vibe coding thing. That's an instantiation of AI, making its way into the crypto space in an interesting way. And I think it's a lot. I think of AI less about being these like free thinking kind of entities that are like doing things on our behalf without us like prompting them to do it, versus like just really, really advanced tools, right? For right now, it's mostly software developers or people who couldn't software engineer but can speak English, right? And so like every iteration of, I guess, software engineering has gone through this, right? Like initially it was like zeros and ones and like binary, right? And you kind of had to know that to actually like program something, right? And then it was kind of abstracted, and these like layers of languages were created, like Python and Java, and like they kind of abstracted a lot of the difficulty of dealing with like things like binary, right? And made it a lot more accessible to build things like in software, right, through these languages. AI is, I think, kind of the next step of that, which is just like it even makes it, you don't even have to deal with Python and Java, right, necessarily. Like you can just talk in English to some sort of AI model, and it'll create things for you. And so I think that's just like a huge productivity boost for all builders in crypto, and just opens the door for people who don't necessarily have that skill to build. So I think in that sense, AI is very much happening. I think what you're specifically referring to are like maybe the agents, right?
Yes. Yeah.
I think agents obviously are going to be a big thing. I don't think the first iteration of them were particularly interesting from our perspective, but I don't think that's the case long term. I think we are interested in seeing like very like, I think a lot of the first iteration basically was like very generalized things, like, oh, they created a Twitter account and they started talking about a lot of stuff, and like the visions for these things were like very wide ranging in terms of what they could do, but they couldn't really do anything well. Versus like I could see specific companies or protocols create very like verticalized agents to do very specific tasks. Like I could imagine Camino or Jito like create very specific agents who do specific things for their users on their platforms. And so I think we'll see more and more of that, but not so much the generalized version is kind of my view at this point.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. What about meme coins? You mentioned maybe Futarchy is a new form of Launchpad, but meme coins are obviously still a huge business vehicle on Solana, maybe the biggest still. So just in that sphere, what kinds of interesting new things are you seeing?
That's a good question. I heard Pump Fun re-enabled the live stream, so that's probably
with many more guardrails. Yeah,
which is good to see. I think meme coins. I mean, meme coins have been amazing for Solana. I don't think there's any way around that, right? Like, I think all kind of like it's lifted all ships, right? Like, Jito wouldn't be doing as well if it wasn't for like a bunch of tokens being launched, through Pump.fun. I think this sort of mechanism that Pump.fun kind of, they didn't even, again, this is actually something, again, that's a little bit going way back into the roots of crypto, which is the bonding curve, which was like something that was kind of forgotten and like not productized for a very long time, until Pump Fun kind of created this mechanism for like, oh, we're going to launch the meme coin bonding curve to Radium. Right now, obviously, they've kind of like tried to create their own AMM and like cut out Radium. But I think this sort of mechanism is like really interesting. We see a lot of people sort of using this mechanism for a lot of different like social fi apps, for instance. But for meme coins specifically, I don't know. Like, I think they will always be a part of crypto. I mean, I don't buy like sort of maybe the Murad view of meme coins, that it's going to completely like overtake tech crypto. I think that's where most of the growth will come from. But I do think meme coins will always serve sort of as this like interesting kind of casino / like fun game of trading, and a way for people to sort of have fun together on chain, and I think there's going to be all sorts of experiences that leverage them. And I don't think they're like an evil or by any means. I think they're sort of just for what it is. I think it's like a fun thing that people do. So that's generally my view on it. I don't see actually in the hackathon that we're running right now, like I don't see too many people actually working on meme coin related stuff right now. But it may come back. I'm not sure.
I want to talk a bit about founders. One thing I think is cool about Colosseum is that anyone can enter and just be a person and then become like a crypto startup founder with venture backing within a matter of weeks. But not everyone who's good at like building an app is necessarily good at running a business. So having gone through a couple cohorts of Colosseum by now, I guess what's one big learning point or misconception or mistake you see some like first time founders making?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think generally, like, I think we've done a good job avoiding this archetype a little bit, just through the nature of like using the hackathon as the way that we kind of choose founders to invest in. But I think pivoting is not a bad thing that people should fear. I think a lot of founders, well, at least how we've kind of view it, like we, from an investment standpoint, we look for people who have like really, really exceptional, like technical and shipping skills and are working in a market that we feel is like has a huge opportunity or creating some sort of market that has a huge opportunity. We're less actually concerned with the exact product that they're building at any given time itself. Obviously, you need to find product market fit at some point, but I think generally the founder and whether they have a lot of deep expertise in some sort of specific market matters a lot more than the specific product. And so we recommend, even to people who win the hackathon, we're excited about the product that they're building, but I'd say almost like 40 to 50% of the teams that we have selected and moved on to the accelerator stage have pivoted in a pretty substantial way. Still within sort of the vertical that they're building, but have pivoted sort of the product that they're building. And so that's good. I mean, if that means that they're sort of getting that feedback from users being like, okay, well, maybe this wasn't right in the first place. We need to move on to sort of the next iteration of this idea and get to market and get more feedback and kind of so on and so forth. And so I think all founders should not be fearful of pivoting once there's, you find that there's maybe not market validation with the first idea. So I think we, at least historically, we've seen that's been true, right? I think like a good example of before Colosseum, I used to run hackathons for the Solana Foundation, and like Tensor is like a really good example of this. Tensor, I think, participated in 3 different hackathons, all within sort of like the social NFT kind of related space, but 3 very different products. And like even they've since did really well with the NFT like trading, kind of like the prosumer trading platform. They've had to pivot it again, to Vector. And so I think a lot of the best founders are constantly sort of looking for how to find product market fit at the next stage of the company, basically.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point to bring up, because I was also curious coming into this. Like, you go through this, whatever it is, 1 month, 2 month hackathon period, you come up with an idea and you get a lot of people to buy into it and accept you into this accelerator. And so I was curious how much leeway people have to pivot off of that initial idea, because what you came up with in like a 2-week fever dream might not be the one that, the market's gonna embrace. So it's cool that you, I guess, allow founders to rethink, shift, change their initial idea.
Yeah, and I mean, this actually goes to how we even choose hackathon winners in the first place. Is like a lot of the competition of hackathons is not how much like technical work you've done, and that's actually going to probably get less and less important over time, especially with these like vibe coding tools that we're seeing, right? Like people can just get a tremendous amount of work done with these AI code editors, and so it's more about explaining kind of at each stage of the hackathon why you decided to build this specific feature. Like, what was the prioritization framework that you used to sort of go and build this specific thing? And so that's more honestly what we're interested in, is like kind of like how people prioritize their sprint, and because that kind of indicates what it's going to be like in real life, right? Like of a startup, right? It's just constantly like evaluating every week, every day, like, are we in the right direction? Is this what we should be even building in the first place? And then obviously you need to execute once you kind of determine if it is. But the prioritization thing is like really, really important. Like choosing what to build is a really important aspect of building a startup.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious then, as part of this conversation, to get your thoughts on maybe the most famous Colosseum participant, which is Or, launched with this proof of work program on Solana, went super viral, kind of broke Solana in 2024, and now I think is maybe something that isn't in that viral stage quite as much. You don't hear about it a whole ton. But still obviously has like a talented team behind it, and is, I think, working on going in like a more mobile direction from what I last heard. So what's your take on Or and where they stand, and what can be learned from their journey thus far?
Yeah, a lot there. I think this is another kind of, heading back to crypto cypherpunk roots project, right? It's trying to kind of build a Bitcoin like digital gold asset natively on Solana. And I think, it did have sort of this viral effect early on, and it was a grand prize winner of our first hackathon, and we were very excited about it, and we continue to be super excited about it. Probably actually more conviction today than we did back then, and that is because I think one of the benefits of starting, I guess, second in terms of a startup is that you get to kind of learn what has worked and what hasn't worked for kind of like the area that you're building. And so Bitcoin has been amazing, right? It's crossed the Rubicon. It's crossed the chasm. It's becoming this sort of embedded asset in the financial industry, yet it is so deficient, I think, technologically. I mean, it hasn't evolved at all in, the last 8 years. Every metric except price around Bitcoin has declined in the last 8 years, except price. But there's a good reason for that. One is it's just like it's the only true kind of asset that has been constructed where it can get that much liquidity, and I think Bitcoin is just sort of like opening the door for a lot more of these type of assets to happen in the future. It's not going to be the only one. It's going to be the first one, basically. And I think Or sort of has the opportunity to learn from a lot of the technical we view as deficiencies of Bitcoin, namely that it's just like it can't be really used as a medium of exchange due to the technical limitations of the Bitcoin blockchain. And it doesn't seem that these L2s or side channels or Lightning Network have developed in a way that has unlocked it for that use case, which gives, I think, Or an interesting advantage in the market. I'm not saying that like it's going to displace Bitcoin or anything like that, but I think when you look at the Solana ecosystem and there's also a lack of the use of Bitcoin for another interesting way, right? Like there's so many flavors of Bitcoin that have been wrapped right on WBTC, or there's I forget Zeus. I think Zeus on Solana is trying to bring Bitcoin, but the problem is like no one on Bitcoin wants to give up their Bitcoin on the Bitcoin network, and so like it's kind of this sticky situation, and I think it gives Or the opportunity to sort of fulfill that role of this sort of stable, it's not stable, but like non-sovereign outside the system asset within the Solana DeFi ecosystem. And so it's what it's been doing over the last, I guess year since it launched is one, just sort of stabilizing what they call boosts, are basically these native like liquidity kind of mechanisms for driving liquidity for key pairs of Or with like USDC or Sol, or it had a moment where it was really focused on deepen assets as well. But it can use these boosts to basically create a lot of liquidity for those specific trading pairs, which I think is important. This is one of the reasons why Bitcoin is so important, at least in the traditional ecosystem, which is like you always see Bitcoin drop in price, I feel like, before that there's something like catastrophic about to happen, it just globally, right? I think we saw this most recently with the whole tariff thing. Like Bitcoin dropped way before equities did because it's so liquid. You can just get in and out of it all the time. And so I think Or kind of wants us to be that for the Solana like DeFi ecosystem, where it's just this asset you can get out of. It's very liquid. It's non-sovereign. And I think, there's just like a lot of interesting properties about Or that does differentiate it from Bitcoin.
You previously worked at Square, right?
I did, yeah.
Do you think Jack Dorsey is Satoshi?
Definitely not. Jack Dorsey is like an amazing founder, and obviously created some interesting technology products that pretty much everyone in the United States uses on most days, right? But he is certainly not Satoshi by any means, in my opinion.
So Matt Siegel from Van Eck put out this like slideshow that I read through, and I haven't gone super deep in the Satoshi rabbit hole, candidly. I think it's more interesting that nobody knows who he is, but there were some pretty interesting points in there.
There were.
He got kicked out of Twitter for working on side projects the same year that Bitcoin came out.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people in Silicon Valley are working on side projects in a given time, but I think I worked at Square, and one of my co-founders, Clay, also worked at Square. That's where we met, and definitely an environment that was very kind of like one of the first big tech companies to be friendly to Bitcoin specifically. I think one of the inspirations of Colosseum itself is that there was an internal hackathon run when I was there at Square, and that's actually where sort of the first Bitcoin integration into not only Cash App, but Cash App came from this hackathon. But Bitcoin's integration into Cash App, things like Square Capital came from this hackathon. And so a lot of actually the internal sort of innovations and things that actually drove revenue for the company actually came out of like internal hackathons. So definitely something that was interesting at the time.
Oh, very cool. Today's episode is brought to you by Ledger. Ledger is a secure hardware wallet for your SOL and logins, trusted by 7 million users, and securing 20% of the world's digital assets. It's built a robust ecosystem of products and services, making digital ownership more secure and accessible to everyone. Ledger's newest devices, Ledger Stacks and Ledger Flex, feature the world's first secure touchscreens, making it easier and safer to manage your Solana transactions and assets. With Ledger Live, you can seamlessly manage and stake your SOL and now your SPL tokens, all while staying secure. From Bonk and Pengu to Jupe and Ray, 130 SPL tokens in total can now be bought, managed, and swapped on the go via providers like MoonPay and Exodus from the security of the Ledger ecosystem. Glad we were able to touch on whether Jack Dorsey is Satoshi. Getting back to, actually, before we move on, I've heard you on other podcasts talking about how you started out as sort of a Bitcoin maxi, Bitcoin fan. Yeah. So I just am curious, like, I think that the more I go down the rabbit hole, I really like Solana and I really like Bitcoin too, still. And I think they have sort of different value propositions at this point in time. So how do you feel towards Bitcoin as a guy who was, early at the Solana Foundation and so forth?
I'm a mega Bitcoin fan. I've got into crypto through Bitcoin. I wrote my undergraduate thesis in college about Bitcoin. I've been down the rabbit hole and continue to stay there on that ecosystem and what's happening with Bitcoin. It's just amazing, like it's been able to accomplish in terms of, getting just embedded into this, the traditional financial ecosystem. As much as I love it, and I honestly, like, most of my, assets are in Bitcoin today, I do think that it's not going to be the only sort of digital gold non-sovereign asset that we see reach sort of escape velocity in our lifetime. I think it's just sort of opened the door and cleared the path for that to happen again. And I think it does have some structural deficiencies technologically, but also I think economically. So one kind of big area of kind of debate and discussion in the Bitcoin world right now, and it has been for the past few years, is this: as block rewards decrease every 4 years, in to pay for security, to pay for mining, you need more transaction fees to be included in every block. And so, but there's just not that many transactions because it's so expensive to use the network. And so there's also this security concern sort of long term, right? Is like, how do you get more transactions happening on the Bitcoin network to pay for security when there's basically no block rewards coming up in the future? And so this is something that, again, that OR does not necessarily need to worry about because it's not running its own blockchain. Like the OR team doesn't have to deal with all the complexities of managing its own L1. And therefore it can focus on sort of the tech side of just making it like the high, you can inherit the Solana's like high throughput, and security, right? And so I think that's another interesting thing. But for the time being, I'm a huge Bitcoin fan and probably will be till the day I die. So yeah.
Yeah, I just lately I am wondering like how much I can't believe I'm going to say this. This is going to come back to haunt me. But how much upside Bitcoin has left? Just in the sense that it's like it's become this kind of store of value asset. That narrative is out there. The U.S. government is like put out the Bitcoin strategic reserve thing. It's like how many more rabbits can be in the hat at this point? So I'm sort of just like I don't know. Even just talking to like normie friends about crypto, they'll be like, I feel like Bitcoin's over. Like, which obviously it's not, but I do have my suspicions about, some of the Michael Saylor forever bullish kind of sentiment around Bitcoin as well.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. I think it'll hit $1 million. I think it's just like there's some path dependency there. It's just kind of like coded, I feel like, in almost pop culture and definitely crypto culture. And I think, just once some of maybe the tariff stuff dies down, and I mean, there's just incredible amount of like positive Bitcoin tailwinds at this point. Like there's constantly talking about I think Powell even was like excited about Bitcoin the other day, and the Secretary of Treasury is like talking about how Bitcoin has crossed the chasm, and like they're trying to figure out maybe how to divest gold into some Bitcoin, and like I don't know, I think it's still got a tremendous upside from a price appreciation standpoint, but I don't think it will become like this 1,000-year technology that we're going to be using, in the future, kind of like how we're using gold today, basically.
One other thing I was just curious about, Matty, is, 2024, when you would talk to founders in the US, especially, the biggest struggle you would maybe hear about from them is the regulatory picture. Especially maybe if you're working in the payments or like more consumer facing side of things, it's just a huge pain. Huge uncertainty. Like that's the biggest pain point for founders. Now that the regulatory picture looks a lot better in crypto, what are you hearing as sort of the big struggle for founders today?
The regulation thing is a big thing. I think, the whole regime change has been positive for crypto startups, just in terms of like, they don't have the SEC breathing down their neck about all sorts of arbitrary rules. It's a lot, more clear about, founders being able to locate in the United States, and a lot more freedom in that point. But the big problem has always been like, you need to find product market fit. And so actually, I think a lot of people are sort of blaming regulation for not finding product market fit. Like, if we could only, distribute revenues back to holders, then we'd find product market fit. But then you kind of like peel back the curtain. It's like, well, how much actually protocol revenue is in these things? And it's like pretty minimal. And so it's just like, even if they can distribute back the revenue, or do buybacks or whatever, the protocol doesn't have product market fit. Now, it's not for everything, but a lot of projects don't. So this is always the problem, right? Like, how do you find product market fit? How do you create sustainable markets, right? Where people are just constantly demanding kind of like, I want to participate in that market that you're creating. I think that's the eternal the eternal problem facing founders, not just in crypto, but technology generally.
Saying the quiet part out loud, I like it. There was a debate on the timeline recently where it was some stupid like Base versus Solana thing, but basically, Tolly I think tweeted like Ethereum puts ideology over product market fit, and then Ethereum people were like, nobody has product market fit. So let me pose the question to you: does anything in crypto have product market fit? And if so, what things?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, just in terms of like revenue generation, certainly some things have found product market fit. Just in the last year, I mean, Pump Fun in 2024 and even into this year, tremendous amount of revenue. They've obviously found product market fit for the user base that likes to use Pump. And there's been downstream effects of that. I mean, just as Solana has grown overall, I think things like Jito has found product market fit in a pretty strong sense. I think Camino is kind of getting there as well, from what I've seen. I think Bitcoin has product market fit in a pretty big way, and I think Solana itself has found product market fit for being just sort of this financial infrastructure for people to build applications and markets on top of. So I think, there's definitely some people who have found product market fit. I do agree. I worked in the Ethereum ecosystem before Solana. I have a tremendous amount of respect for a lot of the early builders there, but I do think that there is sort of this ideological gap that occurs between the ecosystem. And I actually much prefer kind of the Solana kind of hard driving view on, we got to find product market fit. We can't, just be in our ivory towers. We can't just be like focused on these sort of like alignment issues ideologically. Like it's really just about, finding something that people want to use and markets that people want to trade. And so, I think that's like a huge advantage for Solana at this point.
Do you think anything in the Ethereum world has PMF?
I think Aave has for a long time. It seems like the capital there has been like really, really sticky for their borrow-lend product. Seems to have found product market fit for L2's launches. Plenty of those, although they probably are diminishing returns at this point. I mean, I don't. I'm following pretty closely what happens in that ecosystem, but I honestly recently haven't seen much in terms of the product market fit department in that ecosystem. This is why Colosseum is focused on Solana right now. I feel like the best founders in crypto are launching their applications and startups on Solana right now. That's why we focused on this particular ecosystem.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the pod. I guess before we do get up out of here, there's a Colosseum Hackathon going on right now. Is it too late? Can folks still get involved? What's the situation?
Not too late. We just kicked it off. The big ask for your listeners is to go compete in the Solana Breakout Hackathon. This is our third hackathon. It's running until May 16th. It's when some product submissions are due, and tons of prizes. We'll be investing in 10 to 15 startups coming out of the winning pool of projects. And just go to colosseum.org/breakout.
Colosseum.org/breakout. Matty, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show. Hope to have you on again soon.
Yeah, thanks, Jack. See ya.
Absolutely. Appreciate it, everyone. Please throw this a like, a favorite, a follow, a subscribe, wherever you get your podcasts. If you've enjoyed this, we'd love if you shared it with a friend. And we'll see you all again very soon.